Hi there. Welcome to today's GNI Live, which is a verification challenge. This means, what's a verification challenge? Well, it means we're going to be using different digital tools to figure out the location of a photo that I tweeted earlier this week. And I've shared a link in the chat. If you haven't seen the challenge photo yet, you want to check it out and play along, there's a link in the chat right now. So my name is Rochelle Solomon. I am the News Lab Teaching Fellow for Canada. And teaching fellows connect with journalists to talk about different digital tools that can help with reporting. And I have colleagues all over the world. And over the past several weeks, we've all been hosting these live sessions. On top of these live sessions, we also hold training sessions directly with newsrooms in our respective countries and regions. And if you're interested in setting something up for your team, it's simple. Just send me an email. You can see my email address on the screen. And with me in Canada, this is available in both English and in French. And just below my email address, you're going to see a website, and that's where you can actually watch back to any of the GNI Lives that I've done over the past few weeks. This is, in fact, what that website looks like. And you're going to want to look for the menu on the left side of the screen, and you'll select On Demand or Past. And there you're going to find recordings of the different sessions that I've been leading for Canadian journalists. I do try to make my examples for Canada, but of course, the topics and the tools, they're relevant to anyone, regardless of where you might be watching from. So, for example, there's a session about resources for reporting on the COVID-19 pandemic, another for tools for freelancers. There's one of my personal favorites, Maps for Storytelling, which goes through Google Earth and Earth Studio. It's a lot of fun. And the latest one from just 2 weeks ago is about analytics for journalists, which explores NCI, the News Consumer Insights tool. So you'll actually also find a session about Pinpoint and other investigative tools. And some of what's included in that session is particularly relevant to what we are talking about today. I'll actually share a direct link to that session in the chat right now, and you can check that out in complement to what we're going to explore together today. There is another training resource from NewsLab, lots of training resources. This is that website. I'll drop it in the chat as well. You can get there easily by going to g.co/newstraining. And what's different about these courses is that they're all self-guided, and they range from topics like environmental journalism to data journalism and machine learning. And actually, here's an example that's very relevant to our topic today as well. So there are several lessons about verification tools, and you can click through the different lessons. And what's great is that there's an explanation on one side of your screen, and on the other, there's an image that helps you walk through the different steps. And in the case of the Training Center website, you're really in control. You can pick and choose the tools that are most useful to you, most useful to your work, and go through them all at your own pace. And lastly, before we do get to today's verification challenge, just want to put this all into context. The Google News Lab, that's the team that I'm part of, it falls under the wider Google News Initiative, the GNI. And my role focuses on the first of these 3 E's that you're seeing on the screen. So to elevate and strengthen quality journalism. If you have questions about those other 2 E's, there's an email address on your screen where the whole Canada team can be reached, myself included, but many more people as well. And if you're a news publisher in Canada, really feel free to reach out to that email address at any time with any questions, and we'll put you in touch with the right person to get you the resources or the right answers. All right, so let's move on to today's topic. We're going to look at verifying an image with online tools. And this could be a photo or a video that someone posts on social media. Maybe someone sent you a photo directly, but for whatever reason, you've decided you want to make sure it is what the description is saying it is, or maybe where that photo was taken, or maybe you have no information about the image at all, and you're trying to identify and locate what it is you're looking at from scratch. So what I want to mention about verification right before we get started is that it can be time-consuming, but it can also be a lot of fun. And you really do get to feel like a bit of a detective looking for clues. And sometimes what's great is you can get really creative about how you're approaching things. And there are so many different digital tools that can help as part of a verification. We're going to see only a very few together today, and then I'll point you to where you can find some others. So to start, First Draft is an excellent resource when talking about everything to do with verification and fact checking. And one of the resources they've published is a guide to verifying online information. And what you're seeing very small on your screen right now is one page from that. And it's a helpful checklist of steps to consider depending on what information you have when you're looking to verify a photo. I'm going to share a link to the full guide in the chat right now so you can have a closer look. It's an easy read, and there's a lot of useful information there that really gets you thinking about your approach to verification. And something else that you'll discover in that guide is that it highlights that verification isn't foolproof. Sometimes you have to make a call if your verification is worthwhile or not. So sometimes you're not going to always get a definitive answer. But with today's challenge, we definitely will have a definitive answer because I know the answer in this case. And I will reveal the answer at the end of today's session. So this is an image that I shared on Twitter a few days ago. And the goal is to find where this photo was taken. And as a bonus, I've added, is this building open to the public? And if it is, what about with pandemic restrictions? So I'm going to show you some different verification tools, and then we'll apply some of them to this image. Since today's challenge was shared on Twitter, I thought we could focus on that to start. And some of the general elements to consider when looking at any image verification that starts on social media. So not just Twitter, but any other social media platform. This is a tool called Botometer, and it is from Indiana University. And it allows you to look at the likelihood of if a Twitter account is a bot or not, which is also a fun rhyme. So if a certain Twitter account is automated or if there is a real person behind it. So if it's automated, it is likely to be a bot, which would really call into question the validity or the purpose of what's being shared by that account. So I thought we could use actor Ryan Reynolds' account just as an example to see how this tool works. He's quite active on Twitter. So what I've done is I've entered his Twitter handle in the search field. I've then clicked check user. And you can see from the meter on the right with the values that run from 0 to 5, a higher score means in this case that it's more likely that the account is a bot. His score is very, very low, so he's more likely to be a real person. Now, if you click on these results, so just by clicking on the blue bar, the tool generates this report, and that can provide further insights about the user's account and the likeliness of if it is a bot or isn't a bot. And that includes the details option you're seeing on the right, and I want to expand that so we can look at it together. Because by clicking on details, you open up a summary of account activity, and you can see if there are any patterns that may lend themselves to being a bot. So for example, if tweets are always scheduled at the same time, that would be an indication that maybe there isn't a human behind this account. So here we can see activities generally quiet in the middle of the night, which lends itself to being more human. In this case, what I've done is I've entered a few different Twitter handles into Botometer and selected check user again. I've done this simply to show that this is only one tool to consult as part of your wider toolkit. So the first account you're seeing is the Chief Public Health Officer of Canada account, Dr. Theresa Tam, then the Toronto Raptors official account, and then the Google Canada official account. So these are all accounts that we know aren't bots, yet the tools identified some activity that has pushed us a little bit towards bot territory, even if ever so slightly. So with all instances, it's really important to click and look at the details and to examine the account yourself. And this is important, as I mentioned, for any kind of social media account. And here are just some questions to ask yourself. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, but to get you thinking when you're starting a verification from a photo that you found on social media. So for example, who follows the account and who the account follows. There could be some interesting clues there. And Botometer in particular, it lets you see a rating not only of the account holder, but a rating as well of those who follow the account and to see if they and who they follow to see if they might not be bots themselves. You might consider when the account was set up. If there was only one tweet, for example, and it's getting a lot of attention, that's something to think about. You could also consider how often the account tweets and what the general content is like. And you could check if there are related links, other social media accounts or websites that are shared in a description. So it's all information that you can use to help assess the validity of a post or an image from any social media platform. All right, let's continue. The next tool I want to show you is a simple reverse image search. And it's easy. It's one of the most effective verification tools. And it can help you find where visual content first came from. You could find other instances of where it has appeared. And a reverse image search can also help you make an identification. So this is an example that I really like because it's fairly recent and it shows how widespread an image can travel. So this photo circulated widely at the end of last year, and the message that went along with it in any number of languages explained that the boy in the yellow shirt grew up to be a scientist who developed one of the COVID-19 vaccines, and it was said to be associated to Turkish-German scientist Uğur Şahin. Now, this one tweet in particular that I've captured on the screen has more than 9,000 retweets and 34,000 likes alone. And certainly not everyone is reading the comments to see that the photo has since been discredited. But a reverse image search shows that the photo was actually part of an artist's photo exhibit. And the exhibit was about Turkish immigrants to Germany. And in fact, it has no connection to the scientists. And since some time has passed since the image was being widely circulated, a reverse image search also brings up different fact checks now. So a reverse image search can really start the process of verifying content or of simply asking more questions, and it is just a matter of a few clicks. So how do you go about doing a reverse image search if you've never done one before? There are different ways. You can go directly to images.google.com. I'll share the link so you can click if you're following along. And what happens there is Google takes the image in question and it compares it to all images that Google has indexed from the web. And it's important to note this isn't every single image in the world, but it is one of the largest databases. And there are a few different ways to launch your reverse image search. So you can use the URL from an image and place it in the search bar that you're seeing on your screen. Or you have a photo saved to your computer, well, you can upload it directly from your device. Another way to go about this, when you right-click on an image using your mouse or two-finger click from your trackpad, this menu appears, and you simply have to select where it says Search Google for Image. And for context, because this might be different on the device you're using, I'm using a Chromebook and I am using a Chrome browser. And when I do so, these are the results that populate from that reverse image search. It's a fairly obvious one, but you get the idea. This is an example I've been using in some of my recent newsroom training sessions. I'll share a URL to this photo in the chat right now. And if you'd like, you can try a reverse image search to see if it's possible to identify who this is. So there you go. It's loading and sharing ever so slowly. There we go. I think this is a really good example to try together because it's a pretty common type of photo. We have a person at a desk. And maybe this is somebody's profile photo for social media, or maybe it was taken to go along with an interview where this person is featured. So depending where you are in the country, this might be an obvious one to identify, but I still do think it is a good exercise to go through the motions. So try yourself with the link that I've just shared if you like. You can try right-clicking on the image as I explained, and from the menu, you could select Search Google for Image. And then here are the results that I got for that reverse image search. So we can see it first zones in on the books behind the man in the photo, but if you scroll past that, you'll see a series of news articles that use this exact photo and identify the man as Charlie Clark, the mayor of Saskatoon. So what we could consider doing here, or in other situations as well, is cropping the image to exactly the spot we're looking for. So in this case, let's say we were just maybe wanting to crop the face to eliminate the background if we were looking to identify the person and not the whole image. Depends what your goals are. I want to make two quick notes if you're using a mobile device and not a computer. So to access reverse image search, you'll have to select desktop site on the menu in your Chrome browser if you're on your phone, for example, or there is also an app to try. So when you hold down and press on a photo on your phone and you get a menu of options, one of them might be search with Google Lens. For reference, I have the Google Lens app already installed and I'm using a Pixel phone. So this might work differently for you, but it is possible on both Android phones and on iPhones. So it shouldn't matter what kind of device you're using. If you want to learn more about Google Lens, I'll share the link in the chat as well. But here's what that looks like. So Google Lens lets you search for photos similar to how a reverse image search works. So these are the results when I used a photo of the same photo of Mayor Charlie Clark that I shared with you. If we click on more results, it quite easily identifies the mayor. So in a different context, Google Lens could help you identify objects that are right in front of you. It lets you search what you're seeing. So you'd point your phone at something and use the tool. You open the app and the tool uses your camera to capture the image and then search online to identify what that image is. But as you've seen with this example, it's also possible to upload a photo as well. I want to point out that Google is not the only tool you can use for a reverse image search. In fact, you should use more than one tool for any verification. So let's look at some other options for searching for images online. There is Yandex. This is a Russian site, and the reverse image search feature is known for being particularly strong with facial recognition. TinEye is based out of Canada, and it looks for exact duplicates of images. So unlike the other tools, it's not going to show you similar images. It's strong at finding copyright and fair use violations on specific images. And then there's Bing, and Bing is from Microsoft, and it calls its reverse image search visual search. So you can go ahead and use any of these image tools individually, or there's a very convenient Chrome browser extension that allows you to run the same image search through all of these browsers all at the same time. So it's called RevEye Reverse Image Search. I'll share a link to the Chrome Web Store where you can download it. And it's certainly a time saver because what it does is once it's installed, it becomes available when you right click, like when we were searching Google for image, the same option when you right click on your mouse or double click on my trackpad because I'm on a Chromebook in a Chrome browser. But again, you have this option here where you can select all search engines or one in particular. When you do select all, the search will automatically launch in each search engine in different tabs on your browser. So they kind of just pop up all four of them at once. It is a lot of results to look through often, but the different search engines do turn up different results, and some are more precise than others depending on the image you're searching. So it's definitely a worthwhile exercise when you're trying to do an image verification. All right, let's move on to another tool, EXIF data. This is another element to consider when trying to verify a photo. And EXIF stands for Exchangeable Image File Format. And if it's available from a file, it can help you find really precise information like the date, the time, even the location that a photo was taken if the GPS function was turned on, the type of camera or phone that was used. And this is all coming from the metadata files. EXIF data is part of every digital image that's captured, but social media platforms do strip EXIF data from image files. So for this to be useful, you would actually need access to an original file. If someone has shared an image with you using Google Drive or maybe Dropbox, or maybe they've shared it by email, you could look in and the EXIF data could still be attached. But if you're taking a photo from Facebook or from Instagram or from Twitter or any similar platform, unfortunately, you're probably out of luck. What you're seeing on your screen now is one of so many different tools you could try using to check EXIF data. This one is called Jeffrey's Image Metadata Viewer. It has a very simple interface. You upload a photo or use the URL to a photo, confirm you're not a robot, and simply click View Image. I want to show you what's possible to see when an image file still does have the EXIF data attached. So this is a photo that I had on my computer. It's from a work event in 2019. And a colleague had taken this photo and shared the original with the whole group. And you can see from the EXIF data, the type of camera model to the location, the date, and just so much more information. On the right side, you can see there's even GPS coordinates and the specific date, November 8th, 2019. So there's a lot of different data points to go through. If we look back at the very first page, this particular tool even has a link built right in to take us directly to a map of the location. It couldn't be simpler than that. So if we click on that link, we see that we're in Winnipeg. And if we use Street View, we can identify that we were at the Manitoba Museum. So it's important to mention, as useful as this can be, metadata can be manipulated quite easily. So again, this is just one tool to keep in mind that's part of a much wider verification toolkit. So we've talked about reverse image searches, we've talked about EXIF data, and I want to point to InVid, which I've pointed to in other training sessions before, but it's this tool that has both of those functions built in as well, and so many others. So InVid is a free Chrome or Firefox extension. And because of all these different tools that it's bringing together, the developers call it a Swiss Army knife for verification. And if you haven't seen this tool, you're going to see why. It's very convenient because a lot of options are living all in one place. So we won't look at all of them, but we'll look at some of them together. The analysis and metadata options you're seeing highlighted on your screen now both look at metadata whenever it's available on a file. Analysis is for YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter videos. And the metadata option is similar to what we saw with Jeffrey's Image Metadata Viewer. As you can see here, I ran the same group photo through the InVid metadata function, and the results are similar to what we saw with the other tool. There just aren't as many as we saw with the tool we saw before. And there are more options, as I mentioned, to play around with from InVid, so let's take a look. There's the forensic option that can help detect manipulations to a photo. There's a magnifier that can help you quickly take a closer look at certain parts of an image. And another option in InVid is a function called keyframes. And this is really useful for video verifications. And keyframes allows you to copy a video URL or to upload a video file directly into the tool. And then you can view different keyframes. So that means you can view different still images from the video. And the tool then lets you click on each of those images to do a reverse image search. So the thumbnail option you're seeing right next to the keyframes option, it allows you to do the same thing. It quickly triggers a reverse image search as well. But in this case, it's doing so from the thumbnails extracted from a YouTube video specifically. So that's the distinction there. I do have an example of keyframes I'd like to share with you all. So right here, what you're seeing is a tweet that shows a video of what the person tweeting has described as an air attack. And the Twitter account in this case has more than 97,000 followers, so pretty big following. And if we take the URL for this tweet, so that's what you're seeing on the right side of your screen, if we take that and we place it in the tool, we press submit, this is what we get, this series of images from the video. And now, as I explained, when you click through each image, it's going to automatically launch a reverse image search on that image. So as you can imagine, going through the results for different reverse image searches can be extremely time consuming. That is part of certain verifications, but I'll speed things up because I've been through results already. If we click on this image in particular, You can see from the results from the reverse image search that this has been identified as being an image from a video game. There's a forum that's popped up in the results where people are talking about a game. And then if you scroll down further in the results, there are even different fact-checked articles that discredit the video and also point to the same video game. Oops. Okay, there we go. So the last element of photo verification that I want to point to today is all about determining a specific location and using information that's publicly available to go about doing that. And there's so much that's possible with Google Maps, Street View, and with Google Earth. And these are some examples of elements of a photo to consider when you're looking to verify a location. So you want to look at the photo for any distinguishing features like the street layout. For example, what side of the street are vehicles on? License plates can be really helpful. Phone numbers, languages on signs, what people are wearing, different kind of landmarks and specific architectural features, all things to keep in mind when you're trying to work through a photo verification. And also that any small detail could end up being a really big clue. So I want you to keep landmarks in mind, and let's look at this example together. It's courtesy of my colleague, Miguel, who is the News Lab Teaching Fellow in Australia. So thank you, Miguel. It's a great example. It's another one that uses keyframes from InVid and then goes into using maps. So this video, pardon me, it's from TikTok. Pretty impressive video. A truck that is truly packed with furniture of all kinds, maybe a full apartment's worth. And let's say for one reason or another, we want to confirm where this video was taken. I'm not going to take you through each step of the verification in this case. So if you do have a specific question, I'm happy to answer it by email. Just send me a note and I can walk through it with you step by step. But what I want us to focus on is using different buildings and shapes we see in the background to help us make a verification of a location. So if we take this video, save a local copy, put it into the keyframes option in InVid, these are the keyframes that populate. And I found the image you're seeing outlined in green. That one I found interesting because it's an unusual yellow building or sculpture in the background that could help us identify where this is. So here's that image closer up. I know it was small on the last screen. And using a cropped version of the image, we can run a reverse image search and ultimately can identify this as a sculpture in Mexico City. And then we can go locate it on Google Maps and Street View to be sure, and we could even take it another step further and go look on Google Earth. So I clearly skipped a few steps here for the purposes of time, but the idea is to look for details in photos and videos. And sometimes important details, they fly by so quickly, especially in a video, it's just in the background as a flash, or in a still image, it could just be really hidden somewhere. But by being very careful and paying close attention and using some of the tools we've just seen, you could help make an identification. I've mentioned several times there are many more different tools to explore and to test for online verifications. I've pointed to this resource before, and I'm going to point to it again, the Bellingcat Online Investigation Toolkit. There are a lot of recommendations here, and they're neatly organized into different tabs along the bottom of the spreadsheet. And the different tabs indicate what the different tools might help you do. So there's a whole tab for image and video verification, others for social media and for maps and location-based searches. It really goes on from there. I'd highly encourage you to take a look. I'll share the link in the chat right now. There you go. It can be a bit overwhelming because there are so many options, but you're sure to find something to help you with your verification there. And with that, I think we should get back to our challenge. Let's keep everything we just looked at in mind and go and look back at our photo and work through some of the different steps to help make an identification. So here again is the image that I tweeted the other day. And let's start with our social media audit. So in this case, we do know that I'm not a bot. And if we look at my account, I've been tweeting about the GNI Live events for the past few weeks, so we could determine that this seems legitimate. Sometimes on a tweet or other social media posts, there is geolocation information, like a city name, for example. In this case, if we take a closer look, there is no such information. But it's important to remember, of course, that even if there was information about a city here, there's no way to know for sure if the photo was taken where I was standing at the time that I posted it, or if it's a photo from a few years ago that I'm just posting now, or maybe even somebody else took the photo somewhere else in the world. Sometimes these bits of information can be really good clues. In this case, it doesn't really matter. We don't have any of those clues from the tweet, so we have to move on. And let's try a reverse image search. We can use the Rev.I reverse image search Chrome extension, which you'll remember searches 4 different search engines all at once. So I ran the search and I spent a lot of time going through the results, and there were no results in TinEye. So this isn't a widely circulated copyrighted photo. There were lots of medieval castles in Yandex, and the same with the Bing results. And the Google image search also had cottage-looking photos as part of the similar images results. And it also zoned in on the flowering plant. And plants can be a great way to help identify a location, either because they may be native to a certain region or to a certain season. But in this case, it wasn't a helpful clue. So we can continue to move on. Let's look at our image and look at some of the distinguishing features. So in this case, we have a rounded roof. We have that decorative element on the point of the roof. There's a chimney. There's some kind of sign on the side of the building. And there's also a street sign on the lamppost. So we can take a look at that. We can use the magnifier tool from InVid to zoom in on certain parts of the image. So what I did is I saved a copy of the image to my laptop, and then I opened InVid. And using my mouse, I hovered the magnifying glass over the image. So I started first on the sign that we were seeing on the side of the building. And it looks like there's a CH in some word here, which might be a clue to remember. It's not so helpful right now. Maybe down the road. And I also looked at that sign on the lamppost, and we can see clearly it's a no parking sign. But what about the other text? Now, the sign isn't in English, it's in French. And I speak French, so I can recognize that it's in French and what it's saying. But what if we didn't? We could use Google Translate to help us better understand what's on the sign. So there are different ways to use Google Translate. If we don't know what language this is, the tool can actually help us identify the language. You can simply add the text to the box on the left, and it translates to what we're seeing on the right. It does it automatically, and in this case, it even recognized that the source language was French without us having to tell the tool. And so we see here it confirms, yes, it's a no parking sign, but we know now the full details. So no parking except vehicles with a permit, Sector 3. I showed you Google Lens earlier, and I want to show you how you could also use it here. So if we happen to have been standing in front of the sign, we could have held up Google Lens, held up our phone with the app open to the sign, and it could have performed a translation. But as we saw with our example with Mayor Charlie Clark, you could also upload a photo to Google Lens. So this would be really useful in a case where if we weren't able to recognize or even type out the characters from a certain language that were on a sign, we wouldn't have been able to type them out in Google Translate, but we would have been able to hold up our phone and get a translation directly over the image. So what you're seeing on your screen now, the original photo is on the left. And on the right, you can see Google Lens has translated directly over the French text into English right on the image itself. So now that we know what the sign translates to, what I did is I took the French text, the original text, and I put it in a regular Google search just to see what it would give. And to my surprise, the top results were almost exclusively for pages about Montreal. And then when I went through the photos, many of the results looked just like ours. So this was a pretty good clue to use, right? So now we know Montreal is something we can work with. And just as a side note, it's funny because Montreal parking signs are notoriously confusing. So to end up here, it just made me laugh. Now, I did think, okay, signs in Montreal, I know to be confusing. I opened up some of the parking sign images just to get more familiar with what this particular sign means. And I saw that this is specifically a sign about residential parking. So now we have 3 clues about Montreal, we have Sector 3, and we have residential parking. And this led me to search for all those clues together. I figured there had to be a map from the city that showed where the different parking sectors are located. And I played with my search terms for a bit, and I landed on this search in French, but there would have been many others to try as well. So in this case, I searched Secteur 3, Montréal, Stationnement, Rue, which translates to Sector 3, Montreal, Parking, Street. And I did find what ended up being a really great resource. So it was this interactive map where I was able to select and display the residential parking zones in the city. And there we see Sector 3. And so now I have this much narrower area to zone in on as part of my verification. And I know from the map that we're in an area called Vieux-Port. So we're in the old port of Montreal. This is also a great find for making a list of some of the keywords that could help with our search. So the area is labeled as Old Port or Vieux-Port. There are also some main streets and landmarks that we can make note of here too that could help us in the next steps of our search. And at this point, we could also consider just going into Street View and navigating up and down the streets of this particular zone until we find the building we're looking for, or we could do the same using Google Earth and satellite imagery. But let's try something else. Let's go back to our reverse image search. In the Google reverse image search, we can add search terms to our image search. So I took our image, I right-clicked, and I searched Google for image, and then added Montreal to the search field. And there was this photo that popped up in similar images, and I thought right away I recognized the roof and maybe the chimney. But whether it is or isn't the right place, the travel blog that had posted this image didn't actually identify it on their site, so it was a bit of a dead end. I ran the reverse image search again, and this time I used the image and the French Vieux-Port Montreal. So from that list of related words that would be useful, I took Vieux-Port and Montreal. And when I did that, I immediately saw a photo that looked like it could be a good match. And when I clicked on that, it identified the building as the Chateau Ramsay. So I searched for Chateau Ramsay Montreal and got the location of that building on Google Maps. And as you can see, there are also official sites to look through, similar images to look through as well, but I was interested in going right to the map. And we can see we are in fact in the same area as the parking map we saw earlier. So here's that parking map. So you can see it really does match up. Obviously, it's a good sign. So I thought we could open the map together. Let's take a look. So here's the map we were seeing on the screen on the slide. What we can do now is go and grab Pegman, the little yellow bonhomme at the bottom of our screen, click and drag him over our map. Oops, I'm going to do that again because I misclicked. There we go. Click and drag him over our map and come to where we see Chateau Ramsay has a little red peg on our Google map. And if we drop Pegman into the map, we are now in Street View, and we can look around. And I dropped the peg quite well, and we can see here it looks quite familiar. We see the roof, we see the decorative element on the roof, this sign, the lamppost. So if our photo hadn't been obstructed over here, the sign we would have seen actually read Chateau Ramsay, and our identification would have been quite simple. One other thing I want to show you here is on the left side of your screen, you have Street View historical imagery. So if we click on the little clock, we can see that we have images here going back all the way to 2007. So here's 2007, the same view. Well, we know our photo wasn't taken in 2007 because the panel on the side of the building, the poster was different. If we go to 2012, also a different panel. If we go to 2015, oh, there is our panel that also is there. They certainly haven't changed the poster in a long time. There it is as well. So we know that we are at least somewhere in more recent history over the last few years. If we go back to our presentation, there we are on Street View. So here you're seeing on the left an image from Street View and compared to our original photo. So it is in fact the Chateau Ramsay Historic Site and Museum of Montreal. So the first part of our mystery is solved. And the next part is quite simple. We wanted to know if this building is open to the public. Yes, it's a museum, but let's go to the official website just to make our verification as secure as possible. So this is the museum website, and they've made it very easy and added the COVID restrictions information right to their landing page, and we can see the opening days and hours. So there we go. And in fact, looking at the museum's website, I'm noticing that the red shutters on the building, well, that is the photo from the reverse image search or a perspective, the same perspective that we found in that travel blog. So it was, in fact, the right location. Had there been an identification on that blog or on that photo, we would have been able to stop right there and our verification could have been made. And you'll also notice that the woman in this photo is even wearing a costume with a bonnet, which was part of that sign on the side of the building. So all that to say, the path that got us here is just one path of so many different ways that you could go about doing a verification for this image alone. And I might have even exaggerated a little bit to show some different tools that you could use. So here's someone who got it right. Congratulations to Scott. I posted the verification challenge on Twitter, but also on LinkedIn. And Scott responded there with a link to the Chateau Ramsay in one of the comments. And I asked him if he could share his steps, and I'll go through it quickly. Here's what Scott did. So he noticed the sign said Secteur 3, which indicated to him it was a French-speaking area. And since he knew that I was working with Google Canada, he guessed it was probably a photo taken in Canada, and specifically we're in Canada, it's French-speaking. It's most probably, not exclusively, but most probably Quebec. He says the street sign design did look like Quebec or Montreal to him, and the fact it said secteur, the fact it pointed to a sector, suggested it wasn't a small town since there were at least 3 parking sectors. And he also noted that the stonework on the building looked old. And then from the angle of the road being a little hilly, he first thought Quebec City, which is quite hilly. And he noticed the CH that we also noticed on the red sign. And he, in his mind, thought, okay, this was always going to be Chateau. No, he noticed the bonnet on the woman's head and thought, okay, so this is a historical place, likely a museum or a historical society. And so he immediately just searched for Chateau Museum Quebec. Chateau Ramsay came up in the results. He looked that up in Street View, et voila. So again, lots of different ways to get to the same answer. And the truth is, if someone had just emailed me and asked me for the original file, I could have shared that. And immediately you would have been able to look at the EXIF data, and it includes that handy link to take us directly to the location of where that photo was taken. If you try to run the EXIF data for the photo from the tweet, this is all you get. So it's clear that you really do need an original image, an image file for it to be useful at all. So again, no single path to get to the same answer. And in fact, I didn't even take this photo. I want to thank Michael Belcher, who posted it to Facebook last week. And when it popped up in my feed, I just thought it would be great for this verification challenge. And he kindly gave me the permission to use it here. And he posts great photos. And here's where you can go see some of them and follow him on Instagram. And a final note, in this case, I took Michael's photo and made this into a bit of a game for us to work through together. But if you discover an image that's being shared is false and spreading misinformation, there are steps you can take to help stop the spread of misinformation. And again, First Draft has a really great resource about this. I'm going to share the link to the article you're seeing on the left side of your screen in the chat right now. And this outlines how journalists can avoid amplifying misinformation in their stories by clearly marking photos that are fake. Because sometimes it's true, a story may need to include a photo of something that's false to help illustrate the point, to provide evidence. But the idea is to make sure that by republishing a falsehood, you're not accidentally recirculating it. So you can see on the screen, I've included some examples of what different outlets do. Some are doing this more successfully than others. And actually on the bottom right is from Facebook. So even certain platforms have introduced their own mechanisms to identify false information, to identify false or manipulated images and information. And with that, we are at the end of today's session. As I mentioned earlier, you can watch this session back or watch any of the other sessions. They've all been recorded. I've been presenting them over the past few weeks now, all part of the GNI Live series. And it's all at the website that I'm dropping in the chat right now again. You're going to want to select past or on demand from the menu on the left of that website. And then you'll get a list of all the different sessions that you can watch back and hopefully enjoy. So please feel free to get in touch with any questions at any time about verification or other topics that we've covered in the past. Thank you so much for watching live or on demand and for your little hellos in the chat. I really appreciate it. And see you next time. Have a great afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you might be joining us from in the world. Bye.